Welcome to the JAMODI podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is JAMODI, just a matter of doing it. Coaches, the JAMODI podcast is powered by Shoot 360. The future of basketball has arrived in Dallas-Fort Worth. Shoot 360 combines the latest sports technology with the fundamentals of basketball skill development. The result is a one-of-a-kind video game-like basketball program designed to improve your shooting, dribbling, and passing. Visit shoot360dfw.com to learn more and register for your free 1-hour workout evaluation. Shoot 360, the future of basketball is here. It sounds like you and I were similar players, because when you were talking about from the same generation and then also had probably similar coaches, have you always been okay as a coach now and starting out with them asking why, or has that been an adjustment for you from the way you were coached to, all right, I got to do this a little differently now with them?
Well, I think the beauty for me is I've worked for a lot of different people, and you figure out who needs what. And when you're an assistant coach, you're just trying to play whatever role the head coach needs from you, and whether that's on one side of the ball or the other, whether that's guards or forwards, whether that's good cop, bad cop, whatever that is, you figure out how to do that the best you can. And so I think, it was a really good thing for me going from college to the pros, because I do think more of the pros have been playing longer and they naturally do begin to want to know why. And I think I learned, when I first went to the WNBA, my biggest question was, okay, I know the game. I know 18 to 22-year-olds listen to me and think I know the game. Will 22 to 32-year-olds, really listen to me and feel like I know the game? And probably my biggest compliment my first year in the pros was Jazz Thomas was our starting point guard with the Connecticut Sun. We do exit interviews at the end of the year, and she told me I was the best coach she'd ever had at really being able to explain things in a detailed way that they still really understood, it wasn't overly detailed, but that I had a way of explaining things that made them super confident in what we were doing and why we were doing it. And so that gave me a lot of confidence in terms of how I was communicating, how I was speaking. And then on the flip side of that, my second year in the pros, I was a defensive coordinator for the Sun team. That's, quite frankly, most of those same starters are the starters in the finals right now. And so it's really fun to continue to watch, Jonquel Jones and her progression. But Alyssa Thomas was a player that has always been a Y player and had her own opinion on things too, and wasn't afraid to share it. And we were in a film session my second year. We were playing Phoenix. We'd beaten them 3 weeks before that, and we'd singled Griner up. She had 30 some, but we beat them, and she'd even dunked on us. And I'm in the film session talking about, hey, we're going to have to double Griner. We're going to work on it. And, right there in front of everyone, she's like, why are we doubling Griner? We singled them the last time, we beat them. And my answer was, hey, this is really simple. Coaches don't just throw a dart at a dartboard and say, I want to do something different. And so it was very easy for me to say in that moment, hey, in these last 5 games, Phoenix has been getting Griner 32 touches a game. When we played them before, she was at 16 to 17 touches a game. We cannot single her up 32 times. We can't. But, we can single her 20 times, but bring a double 12 times. But if we don't work on it, we're not going to be good at it. And on top of that, you are the person that's going to be doubling and being the most impactful, and so I just had a conversation with her afterwards, because I felt like in that moment, the locker room was a little uncomfortable, because it was so direct. It was direct, and it was questioning. Yeah. And I told her, separately, I said, AT, hey, it was a really good question, and a question that I was totally prepared to answer, and I think as long as you understand that I'm always thinking about why and what we're going to do and ask it the right way, I'm always going to answer that, because that just makes everybody more confident that we're prepared, in whatever way, because you're never going to ask me a question personally that I'm not going to have an answer for, And I said, I just firmly believe that. Like I work at this, like this is my craft.
This is what you
so,
do. Yeah.
this is what we do. And
Yeah.
so we're looking for ways to give you an edge and a reason, a way to compete, but at this, on the same token, if we have a philosophy on how we're guarding cross screens, but she says to me like, hey, I'm an undersized 4 player and it would be easier for me. Like, hey, if I'm guarding a bigger 5, I want to shove them high off the screen because I want to keep them away from the basket. But if I'm defending someone who I'm stronger than, I want to shove them lower so I can keep them where I want to keep them. Like, to me, that's awesome. Like that may philosophically be, hey, we're typically a go low, bump high, cross screen kind of defensive team. But that doesn't mean that what you're saying doesn't make a lot of sense and give you the best chance to be successful, guarding who you're guarding. And so I think that's the beauty of players who've played a long time.
Yeah.
They understand their strengths and how they're capable of getting the job done. And so being willing to kind of listen and be more of a player's coach, I think trends back now to like what we're talking about in the college game and being more of a player's coach and knowing the difference between college and the pros is knowing when to draw the line and know that none of them have that kind of experience.
Yeah.
To have those answers, but to be able to ask them, to be able to be comfortable asking. I wish I had been truly comfortable in a lot of moments, like asking those questions. And I think it's about teaching them the right way, to ask those questions.
See, I think that's a great environment to have for your team. And I was sitting here while I was listening, thinking about why don't more coaches allow their players to have questions or even a question? I mean, I like how obviously if a player questions in an inappropriate way at the wrong time, then that's the conversation we teach them. We teach them how to do that. If it's just real life, like how to have conflict the right way. It's a great lesson. But I wondered if some coaches stay away from allowing players to give their why or ask why because they don't want to have to go deeper. Like you're secure. You said it yourself. You said, I will have an answer. I believe in what I do. I think that's one, maybe when I was younger, don't ask me questions. This is right. Don't challenge it. Maybe because deep down, what if they have a good point? Like, what if it's not the only way? So I think the security that you showed probably translates to a really healthy culture.
Well, I want them to love playing the game and I want them to, certainly there are times when there are bad questions just because, and it doesn't mean a player thinks it's a bad question, but sometimes like afterwards, of course, you're like back with your staff and you're like, wow, I mean, can you believe so-and-so, right? but you also want that culture that they aren't afraid to ask those questions because you're going to say like, wow, that's a really, not such a good question, in that environment. I think you want them when they don't understand. Like how many times have players looked at you and you say, do you understand? And they nod at you and they say, yes. And they have no idea what they're supposed to be doing. They just don't want to feel stupid or they don't want to feel like they don't understand. They don't want their teammates to think they don't understand.
Yeah.
And you're so much better off like saying, can you show that to me again? What do you mean? Like, that's something I haven't heard before, or at least go over to an assistant coach or somebody on the side and say, yeah, I didn't really understand. Like, help me understand. Because when you have success at something, then it's going to become easier to emphasize and do again, and when you don't understand what you're doing and then you don't have success, then you start questioning. And so I think, as players begin to really understand what they're supposed to be doing, it gives them a better chance to be successful. And, it's like, I think that the toughest part about coaching this generation is like their coping mechanisms, and I think that's the thing. There's this anxiety about, how good they're supposed to be, about how they're supposed to look all the time, or that they can't make mistakes, and it's trying to create a culture where there's nothing wrong with mistakes. Mistakes are bad mistakes when someone makes a mistake and we correct it, and then somebody else makes the same mistake and we correct it, and then somebody, because then they're not dialed in, they're not paying attention. And I know sometimes, we have to understand that some are visual learners, some have to physically do it, and they won't always get it right. But it just, I want to make sure that like they're making mistakes, not the same one, because they're not paying attention, and if they're coachable and they're paying attention, you're going to have to fail to succeed. And I think so many are so afraid to fail, because of not just themselves, but what they perceive people will think. To me, I find that right now, I think that's the biggest challenge in coaching is, we have a lot, there's talent, but it's this idea of being able to cope when things don't go exactly how they want them to. And when I think 20 years ago, we anticipated that things were going to be hard. We didn't walk into situations with social media and, all the expectations that aren't even placed on us, because of our own, but because of other people's expectations for us. I mean, there's a difference between being a 5-star guy and being someone everyone, knows is supposed to be good because you got 5 stars in front of your name. But now, you're seeing their highlight reels once a week on courtside and all these different, and they're not showing all the mistakes they made. Believe me, I've watched players that are, 5-star players on the girls' side, and I've seen highlights after a game. I'm like, I was at that game. Those were the 4 good plays she made. I mean, not that she's not a good player, but we've highlighted 4 really good plays and didn't show the turnovers and the bricks and so now this idea that this player is going to come in and make the highlights, on every possession, it's a lot to ask our young people.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the JAMODI podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.